How do you do well in school? How do you get good grades, improve test scores, graduate on time, go to college, maybe even an elite college? How do you do well in college? How do people do all of those things? What are the most important things people need to do those things well? Most of the time, we are told that hard work, discipline, organization skills, and responsibility are the most important things. And it's also often implied that intelligence helps too. And sure, all of these things matter. Hard work and effort are generally essential ingredients in any meaningful endeavor, and hard work often produces desired results. In fact, if you're working really hard at something and not producing the desired results, it's probably time to reevaluate why you're doing what you're doing. Hard work matters, for sure. But what if I told you that, while these things matter, by themselves, they are actually not the best predictors of who does well in school? Not even close, as a matter of fact. No, believe it or not, the most influential factor affecting schooling outcomes is mom and dad. Or more precisely, students' family social class status, most often measured as parents' social class status. There's really not much empirical debate left about this, as it has been researched extensively. It has been researched to death. Family social class background is a primary source of inequality among students, both in terms of educational achievement and attainment, as well as across the academic career. And schools struggle to overcome these inequalities. Some examples. At age 4, almost 70% of kids from high-income families can identify 10 distinct colors, compared to only 16% of kids from low-income families. In 4th and 8th grades, kids from high-income families outscore their low-income peers in reading and math, and by age 24, almost 60% of students from high-income families have completed a bachelor's degree, compared to just 11% of students from low-income families. Over and over again, empirical data show that family social class background is a key driver of educational inequality, of who does well in school and who doesn't. But why? How? Why does social class background matter so much? What's happening with families in higher social class brackets compared to what's happening with families in lower social class brackets that explains these patterns of inequality in education that have persisted for decades? Social science research sheds some light on this. An influential study by sociologist Annette Lareau helps us understand some key dynamics in the relationship between families and schools that impact student performance, and how these dynamics differ by family social class background. Lareau examines what we call cultural capital in her analysis of social class and education, a concept first developed by French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu. But before we define cultural capital, let's first make sure we have a working definition of culture. We can think of culture as a stable set of activities or routines, artifacts, values, and concerns that enable and constrain people's behavior. Notice how similar this emphasis on enabling and constraining behavior is to our definition of social structure. Indeed, if social structures are the rules of the game that enable and constrain behavior, in many ways, we can consider culture the unwritten rules of the game. Culture includes the informal rules that guide our behaviors, and we often learn about culture through everyday interactions over time. A quick example. Imagine you get on an elevator in a public place. There's one other person on the elevator with you, a person you don't know, never met. Doors close and the elevator starts moving. Almost immediately, you notice the other person is staring at you. Obviously staring at you. Unabashedly staring, making no effort to hide the fact that he's staring at you. You try to ignore it, say nothing, shift your weight, maybe glance his direction for an instant, give a fake smile, then you instantly look away. Keeps staring. The elevator ride for a few seconds feels like an eternity at this point. Still staring. You start to get angry. What the hell is the matter with this guy? Maybe you also start to feel frightened. What's this guy going to try to do? Just as you are about to say something like, "Is there a problem?" or "Can I help you?" the doors open on your floor and you get off the elevator as quickly as possible, making sure he doesn't follow you. Relieved, you tell yourself it's over. Well, that's a very normal reaction to what is widely considered unusual behavior. It bothers you. You think about it a lot. You tell your friends about it. You might text someone immediately to tell them about the weirdo you just encountered on the elevator. You'll talk about that person with your friends later. "You won't believe the guy on the elevator today." If you see that person again, you'll go out of your way to avoid them, point them out to the people you're with, and you sure as hell won't get on an elevator with them again. Again, this reaction is normal because the person on the elevator broke a rule. Don't stare at people. The rule isn't written down anywhere. There's no law against staring. But we learn not to stare. How do we learn it? Through informal interactions with people over time, often at least initially with parents. You ever stare at people when you were a kid? I did. I did it all the time. My poor mother had to physically turn my head to keep me from staring at anything I found curious, an act usually accompanied with, "Stop it! Stop staring!" We learn that this is something you just don't do. And we learn it so well, we have strong reactions when people violate this unwritten rule. We even police ourselves. Ever been in a public place and just by chance you accidentally make eye contact with a stranger? What do? You instantly dart your eyes away, panicked that you just breached etiquette, thinking in your mind, "Oh my God, I'm sorry, I just stared at that person and they saw me." We freak out over an instant of harmless behavior. We learn very clearly the cultural expectations for what we're supposed to do and what we're not supposed to do. And these cultural expectations influence our behavior with powerful, sometimes visceral force. That's an example of a type of culture that is widely known. Everybody gets it. There are other forms of culture that are not as widely shared. Another example to illustrate how culture can vary by group and by the social context in which they find themselves. Imagine you are invited to attend a formal dining event, black tie optional. The host of this event has tasked you with selecting a wine to complement the meal, which is planned to be a beef Wellington. Let's make this a simple multiple choice test. Would you select A, a Sauvignon Blanc, B, a Riesling, C, a Zinfandel, or D, a Chardonnay? Inevitably, when I pose this question in class, I get a modest show of several hands for each response, and then about 65% of the class just doesn't answer the question at all. So this is cultural knowledge. Knowing what type of wine best complements what type of food is a form of cultural knowledge and reflects values and concerns of particular people engaged in particular activities or routines with each other. But it's not as widely known or shared a form of cultural knowledge as something like don't stare at people. Some people in our show of hands will demonstrate this knowledge and others won't, and some of those who demonstrate the knowledge will have done so by simply guessing, whereas everyone knows not to stare. For the record, a Zinfandel is a full-bodied red wine that tends to go well with red meat. The other options are all types of white wine that most people wouldn't necessarily serve with steak. For some people, in some situations, this cultural knowledge is important to them. For the vast majority of human beings in the world, absolutely nobody cares. They've never had beef Wellington, don't know what it is, never had a Zinfandel, and don't care. Their lives go on. But this is still a form of cultural knowledge that is valuable in particular social contexts. That's what Bourdieu and Leroux, by extension, mean by the term cultural capital. It's culture that's useful depending on the social context, or as Leroux characterizes Bourdieu's definition, quote, varying cultural skills, social connections, educational practices, and other cultural resources which can be translated into different forms of value as individuals move out into the world, end quote. Importantly, culture and cultural capital shape what people believe is appropriate behavior in different institutional settings, and these beliefs enable and constrain their behavior. Again, they serve as the unwritten rules of the game. With cultural capital, we also see the links to social class. Taking our dinner party example a step further, just your serving of the filet mignon that will be in your beef Wellington will cost at least $30 a pound. One glass of a reputable Zinfandel adds another $20, and the attire one would wear to such an event could easily cost several hundreds of dollars, if not more. So your mere presence at such a social event, following cultural conventions for participation, will cost you many hundreds of times the amount of money that at least 1 billion people on this planet live on to survive in a day. Indeed, the social contexts in which we find ourselves are structured by social class, and social class differences shape the cultural capital with which we define for ourselves what is appropriate behavior. Leroux takes the concept of cultural capital and applies it to an analysis of social class differences in parenting strategies in the social context of their kids' school in her book, Unequal Childhoods. And in doing so, she reveals one key way that family social class background is such an important factor contributing to educational inequalities. Unequal Childhoods is a brilliant and influential book, and in it, Leroux presents ethnographic research on 11 families of different social class status, primarily comparing middle-class approaches to parenting to those of working and lower-class parents. I'm going to compare two students and their families from the book to illustrate Leroux's broader analysis. Two fourth-grade girls, a working-class white girl named Wendy and a middle-class black girl named Stacy. In both cases, each girl had an academic problem that needed to be addressed. How they were addressed, or not, is key to understanding inequality in the everyday routines of schools, and parents play a big role. Stacy's problem was that she had a habit of working slowly. Not that uncommon, but if one works slowly, one can run out of time on assignments, so her grades could suffer at times. Wendy's problem was admittedly more severe. She was at least a couple of years behind in her reading level. It can be difficult for kids to catch up when this happens. Both Stacy's and Wendy's parents, in particular their moms, were deeply invested in their daughter's education, and both recognized that their daughters had problems that needed attention. But how they each defined the appropriate way to deal with these problems in interaction with the people at their kids' schools was a key difference. A difference in approaches to parenting that Leroux finds is due to their social class differences. Stacy's mom and dad are middle-class status. Both completed college and they have six-figure household income. Teachers are required to have a bachelor's degree. If they stay in teaching long-term, they have to obtain a master's. Middle-class parents, almost universally, have the same level of educational attainment as teachers, if not a higher level degree. They have accomplished just as much, if not more, in terms of academic education and credentials. When it comes to education, then, they see themselves as equals to their kids' teachers. If you see someone as your equal, do you feel comfortable expressing your opinion to them? Of course. Why wouldn't you? Because of their social class status, they tend to view the appropriate relationship between home and schools as a partnership, one in which it is appropriate for parents to intervene on behalf of their kids to help solve educational problems. This is part of their cultural capital as it relates to parenting. They view it as appropriate behavior and good parenting to intervene and advocate for their kids in schools, and they feel comfortable doing it with teachers because of their social class status. So when Stacy struggles a bit, her mom feels it perfectly reasonable to go to her teacher and begin the conversation with something like this. Don't you think it would just work out better if we could find a way to give Stacy a little more time? I'm paraphrasing and adding a dash of cynical humor. I'm not quoting Leroux directly. Grammatically, speaking for Stacy's mom, that's posing a question. Is she really asking a question? What is Stacy's mom really saying? Give my kid more time. Just in middle-class snowplow mom speak. Now, importantly, Stacy's teachers could say no in response, but they often don't. Not because they're trying to give some kids advantages that other kids don't have, but because they know that this parent is unlikely to take no for an answer, and they don't have the time or the desire to wage a war with an insistent parent when they have 10 million other things to do. So they often cave and accommodate Stacy, giving her a concrete benefit to her academic performance she would otherwise not have had without her mother's intervention. She gets more time. And again, this is driven by middle-class cultural capital. As Leroux put it, middle-class parents like this mom, quote, believe she has the right and the responsibility to intervene in the classroom, end quote. Compare that to Wendy's mom. When Wendy's very serious literacy problem doesn't get better, Wendy's mom does everything she can think of to help her, even sacrificing her bus fare to get to work to put toward a tutor for Wendy. But she and other working and lower-class parents tend to view their kids' teachers as experts relative to themselves when it comes to academic education. As someone who barely finished high school, Wendy's mom knows that her daughter's teachers have attained far more success and credentials in education than she has. So when it comes to what's best for Wendy in her education, she defers to their professional judgment. That is a very rational position. In fact, Wendy's mom employs this strategy when parent-teacher conferences come along. Wendy has a regular classroom teacher as well as a special education teacher for part of the day to help her with her literacy problem. Wendy's mom sees them both. At one meeting, one of Wendy's teachers strongly advises her to hold Wendy back a year to help her remediate and catch up. She then walks down the hall only to have Wendy's other teacher tell her with equal force that under no circumstances should she hold Wendy back a year. It would be terrible for her. As Wendy's mom put it, quote, "They said opposite things," end quote. What is Wendy's mom to do, especially when she's seeking to rely on the teacher's advice? Well, sticking to her deferential approach, she chooses to wait it out, as she describes it, waiting to see if Wendy improves, perhaps waiting to see if her teacher's plan for a course of action changes. In the meantime, little more gets done to actively address Wendy's reading problem other than what they were already doing. Importantly, this isn't just Wendy's mother's inaction. Wendy's teachers can't get on the same page either. Now, that's not necessarily incompetence. Qualified professionals in any field can disagree on the appropriate course of action. But this kind of interaction between educators and working-class parents can create a situation where everyone involved is contributing to a paralysis in decision-making, so to speak, and the students' educational problems fester, as Wendy's did. Two girls, same grade, both with educational problems. But one of their problems gets active and concrete accommodation that produces tangible benefits, and the other gets more of the same, primarily due to a difference in how their parents and adults interact with each other. Those interactions are driven in part by what their parents believe is the appropriate way to interact, their cultural capital, which is enabled and constrained by how their social class position structures their lives. One of the outcomes? Inequalities in student performance driven by differences in families' social class status.